The sun hung low over the red mesas, painting the vast plains with shades of gold and fire. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying scents of sage and dust. Ahuli, a young Apache woman, moved silently among the rocks, her dark hair tied tightly, her eyes sharp like an eagle's. She was alone but not afraid. Her people needed her. Her village had been threatened by a band of ruthless marauders who had attacked travelers, stolen supplies, and struck fear into the hearts of the Apache tribes. Ahuli's hands gripped her bow tightly. She had always been quick, clever, and fearless. Today she had followed the trail of the marauders, hoping to stop them before they reached her village. But as she climbed over a steep ridge, her foot slipped. She tumbled down, rocks cutting her skin, scraping her arms and legs. A sharp pain shot through her side, and she realized that a scout of the marauders had spotted her. The fight was sudden. Ahuli drew her bow, firing arrows with precise skill. One marauder fell, but more came running from behind the rocks. She swung her knife, parried blows, and dodged attacks, but the numbers were too many. A heavy strike landed on her head. The world blurred and she fell to the ground. I can't, she whispered to herself, closing her eyes. She thought of her family, of her village, of the warm fire and the laughter of children. She thought of the countless suns she had watched rise and set over the mesas. A tear slid down her cheek as she accepted that she might die here alone, on the dry earth among the rocks. But fate had other plans. Ahuli's eyes opened slowly. The bright sunlight was gone. She blinked, confused, and realized she was lying on a soft bed, surrounded by rough wooden walls. The smell of fresh linen and a faint scent of coffee filled the small room. She tried to move but felt the weakness in her body. Her head throbbed, and her side ached with a dull, deep pain. Where am I? She whispered, her voice barely a breath. A voice replied, calm and gentle, "You're safe, don't try to move too fast." Ahuli's eyes snapped toward the sound. A young man stood near the doorway. His hat was tipped back and his hands were rough, but there was no weapon in sight. His blue eyes were concerned. He looked like a cowboy from the stories she had heard, someone who lived by the law of the plains, a stranger to her people. Who are you?" Ahuli asked, suspicion rising in her chest. "My name is Caleb," he said. "I found you lying near the ridge. You were badly hurt. I brought you here." Ahuli's heart raced. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to grab a weapon, to protect herself. But her body was weak and the pain made her limbs heavy. She realized she could not escape. She was at the mercy of this stranger. Why help me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Caleb stepped closer, holding his hands up to show no harm. "Because any life is worth saving," he said simply. "You were alone. You didn't deserve to die like that." Ahuli's mind raced. She had been taught to trust no one outside her people, especially not the cowboys who often brought danger, and yet she could feel the truth in his words. She had been given a second chance. Days passed. Caleb took care of her, cleaning her wounds, bringing food, and tending the small fire that warmed the cabin. Ahuli watched him, studying every movement, every expression. He was kind, patient, and respectful. He never forced her to talk or explain things she did not want to hear. He simply made sure she survived. At first, Ahuli hated the weakness she felt. She could not walk without assistance, could barely lift her arms, and felt trapped in a world where she had no control. She cursed herself for needing help. But slowly, her body healed. Her muscles regained strength, and her wounds closed. One morning she rose from the bed and walked to the doorway, looking at the plain stretched out under the sun. The wind carried the scent of sage and grass, and she realized she could hear the distant howl of coyotes and the rustle of rabbits in the underbrush. The world was alive. Caleb came up behind her quietly, holding 2 cups of water. "You're ready to start walking again," he said. "But take it slow." Ahuli took the water, nodding. Her pride burned, but she knew she could not deny the truth. She had survived because someone had cared. She drank slowly, savoring the cool liquid. "I don't need your thanks," Caleb said, smiling slightly. Just take care of yourself. Ahuli studied him for a long moment. She wondered if she could ever trust him fully, but she also realized that there was something human in his actions, something she could not ignore. As the sun climbed higher, Ahuli began to walk carefully around the cabin. Caleb followed at a safe distance, offering no help unless she asked. She tested her strength, moved over small rocks, and climbed a low ridge near the cabin. The air was warm. The earth smelled of rain from the night before, and she felt the power of her own body returning. But even as she regained her strength, danger was never far. The marauders had not given up. Their tracks led close to the village, and rumors of attacks reached even the distant plains. Ahuli knew she could not stay hidden forever. Her people needed her, and she would not let them down. "Caleb," she said that evening as they sat by the fire, "I need to go back. My village, my people, they are in danger." Caleb nodded slowly, his expression serious. "I figured this day would come. But it's dangerous out there. You need someone with you, someone you can trust." Ahuli shook her head. "I trust no one but myself. I have survived this far alone." "Then I will walk with you," Caleb said gently. "Not because I expect anything in return, but because I promised to save you once. I will do it again if I can." Ahuli studied him. There was honesty in his eyes and a bravery that mirrored her own. Slowly she nodded. She could not ask for more than honesty and courage. And in the wild, sometimes that was enough. The next morning, Ahuli and Caleb set out together. The plain stretched endlessly before them, golden and unforgiving. Each step tested her strength. Each gust of wind reminded her of her fragility. But with Caleb beside her, she felt a strange mixture of caution and hope. Along the way, they encountered signs of the marauders. Broken branches, hoof prints, and the distant smoke of fires. Ahuli's senses sharpened. She led them carefully through the desert paths, teaching Caleb how to read the land, where to find water, how to avoid danger. Caleb learned quickly, but Ahuli noticed his hesitation at times, moments when he hesitated to strike or take risks. She realized he had never faced true survival in the wild before, and yet he persisted. His determination impressed her, and she felt a grudging respect grow in her heart. That evening, they camped near a dry creek bed. Ahuli built a small fire and prepared simple food from roots and dried meat. Caleb watched her quiet, and then offered her a small gift, a water flask, polished and sturdy. "For your journey," he said simply. Ahuli took it silently, feeling a warmth she had not expected. She had prepared for death, for betrayal, for danger, but not for kindness. And yet, here it was, shining quietly in the desert night. As the stars rose, Ahuli closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of the battle that had brought her here, of the man who had saved her, and of the village that still needed her. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous. The marauders were close, and she would need all her skill and courage to protect her people. But for the first time in days, she allowed herself to hope. She had survived against all odds. And perhaps, just perhaps, she was not alone. Cliffhanger. Ending of Part 1. Suddenly, a faint sound reached their ears, a horse's hoof far off but approaching fast. Ahuli's heart tightened. The marauders were near. She looked at Caleb, who nodded grimly. Together, they prepared to face whatever was coming, knowing that the survival of her people might depend on the courage of two humans, different yet united by the fight ahead. Ahuli's eyes snapped open as the sound of approaching hooves grew louder. The wind carried the dust of riders, and she could see the flicker of sunlight on metal and leather in the distance. Marauders. There was no time to hesitate. She turned to Caleb, who was already reaching for his rifle. "We have to move," Ahuli said, her voice steady despite the fear rising in her chest. Caleb nodded. "Follow me," he said. He led her through a narrow path among the rocks, a trail he had noticed earlier that would keep them hidden from the marauders' view. Ahuli's sharp eyes scanned every rock, every bush. Her survival instincts were back in full force. She moved quickly but carefully, guiding Caleb through the rough terrain. The marauders were fast, but Ahuli knew the land. She could hear the horses' hooves echoing in the distance and felt the subtle changes in the wind. "We can set a trap," she whispered to Caleb. Caleb raised an eyebrow. "A trap?" "Yes," Ahuli said. "We'll use the land to our advantage. They think they are chasing prey, but we can turn the desert against them." The plan was simple but dangerous. Ahuli led Caleb to a narrow canyon where rocks formed natural barriers. She instructed him to position himself at a higher point while she prepared to drive the first marauder into the path. Caleb was hesitant but trusted her guidance. As the marauders came closer, Ahuli stepped out, making herself visible. She fired an arrow into the ground near the leading rider. The horse jumped, the rider swore, and the rest of the group followed blindly. "Now!" Ahuli shouted. Caleb fired carefully from above, cutting off their escape. Rocks tumbled down, blocking the path. The marauders were trapped in the canyon. Ahuli moved swiftly among the rocks, her knife ready, her movements precise. She disarmed the first marauder, her strength and skill unmatched. Caleb assisted from above, making sure none escaped. Within moments, the marauders realized they had underestimated their prey. The combined skill of Ahuli and Caleb was more than they expected. The leader of the group, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, raised his hands in surrender. "You can't stop us all," he shouted. Ahuli stepped forward, her eyes fierce. "You underestimated the land and the humans who defend it. Leave now, or you will face worse than death." For a moment, silence filled the canyon. Then the marauders turned their horses and fled, leaving behind the stolen goods and their wounded pride. Ahuli breathed deeply, feeling the adrenaline fade. Caleb climbed down to stand beside her. "That was incredible," he said, admiration in his voice. She shook her head. "It was not just me. It was the land, and it was you. We worked together." Caleb smiled. "Then I'm glad to have been part of it." The two of them began the journey back to Ahuli's village. Along the way, Ahuli taught Caleb more about tracking, hunting, and survival in the plains. He learned quickly, his respect for her growing with every lesson. She in turn noticed his courage and determination. In the harshest conditions, he had remained calm and helpful, never reckless. By the time the sun dipped low in the sky, they could see the smoke rising from the village. Relief washed over Ahuli. Her people were safe, the marauders had been driven away, and she had survived against impossible odds. When they reached the village, the elders and warriors came forward, eyes wide with surprise and curiosity. They had heard rumors of a young Apache woman and a cowboy who had driven away marauders. Ahuli stepped forward, introducing Caleb. "He saved my life and helped protect the village," she said. "He fought with courage and honor." The elders studied Caleb carefully. At first they were suspicious, but Caleb did not waver. He bowed slightly and said, "I mean no harm. I only wish to help." One of the elders, a wise woman named Neil, nodded slowly. "You have proven yourself," she said. "Bravery is not limited by the tribe you belong to. You have our respect." Ahuli smiled quietly. She felt proud of her people and of Caleb, who had earned that respect without violence or arrogance. The next days were filled with rebuilding. Ahuli helped organize the defense of the village, sharing her knowledge of the land, the traps, and the warning signs of danger. Caleb assisted where he could, teaching strategies he had learned from his life on the plains. Together they strengthened the village's ability to protect itself, but it was more than defense. Ahuli realized that humans were capable of extraordinary things when they worked together. She saw Caleb's courage, his kindness, and his determination. She saw how ordinary people could rise to challenges that seemed impossible. One evening, as the sun set in streaks of orange and pink, Ahuli and Caleb sat by the edge of the village. Looking out at the mesas, Caleb said, "I never thought I would be part of something like this. I thought I was just a cowboy wandering the plains." Ahuli looked at him. "Sometimes humans are capable of more than they think. When we face danger, when we protect others, when we fight for what is right, we discover strength we did not know we had." Caleb nodded slowly, understanding. "And sometimes it takes someone like you to show us that." Ahuli smiled faintly. She had faced death and come back. She had fought alone and then discovered the power of trust and teamwork. She knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but she was ready. Weeks passed. The village thrived and the threat of marauders had faded. Ahuli continued to train young warriors, teaching them not only the skills of survival, but also the courage to protect their people. Caleb stayed nearby, helping when needed but also learning from the villagers. He respected their ways and became a trusted friend. One morning, Ahuli walked along the edge of the mesas, looking out at the wide-open plains. She thought of the battle of the marauders and of the second chance she had been given. She remembered the moment she had closed her eyes, expecting death, and the strange twist of fate that had brought her back to life, to Caleb, and to a renewed purpose. A soft voice called from behind her. "Are you ready for another lesson in tracking?" Ahuli turned to see Caleb, holding his hat in his hand, smiling. She nodded, feeling a sense of peace. Together they walked back to the village, ready to face whatever the world might bring. The story of Ahuli and Caleb spread across the plains. People spoke of the brave Apache woman who survived against impossible odds, and the cowboy who learned courage and honor in the harshest of lands. Their story became a symbol of human resilience, intelligence, and the power of working together. Ahuli had learned that even when fate seems cruel, humans have the ability to rise above it. She had learned that courage is not measured by age or strength alone, but by the willingness to act, to protect, and to trust. And in Caleb, she had found a companion who shared those values, proving that even the most unlikely alliances could create heroes. As the stars filled the night sky, Ahuli closed her eyes for a moment, not in fear, not in despair, but in gratitude. She had faced death and returned stronger, wiser, and more determined. She had discovered that humans, when brave and united, could achieve remarkable things. And somewhere in the quiet of the plains, she knew that the adventure was only beginning.